I never thought the wind could scream like a living thing, but that winter of 1885 in the Montana Territory, it did. It howled across the frontier like a pack of wolves on the hunt, clawing at our little Harper cabin as if it meant to rip it right off the edge of the timberline where it clung for dear life. The walls groaned under the assault, weathered boards creaking like old bones, and the cold seeped through every crack, no matter how many rags I stuffed in them. I'd been fighting this land since William died. But that night, with the last scraps of kindling flickering in the iron stove, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me like a fresh grave. My name is Emily Harper, and back then I was 32 years old, though the mirror, if we'd had one that wasn't cracked, would have told you I looked closer to 40. Lean arms from chopping wood and hauling water, weary eyes from nights staring into the dark, wondering if tomorrow would bring more of the same emptiness. The stove's faint orange glow danced across the bare floorboards and the threadbare blankets I'd patched 100 times. Sam, my boy of 10, sat at the rickety table, sharpening his pencil with that same quiet determination he got from his pa. He was practicing his letters, scratching them into a scrap of paper by the dim light, his face set against the gale outside like he could will it away. And little Grace, my sweet girl of 6, was curled up on her cot in the corner, clutching her rag doll that was missing an arm from too many adventures. She hummed a tune, soft and faint, barely rising above the wind's roar, something about bluebirds and summer skies that she'd made up to chase away the shadows. I pressed my palm against the frosted window pane, feeling the ice cling like a permanent breath. "This cold will take us if we don't make it through the week," I whispered to no one, my voice lost in the storm. The woodpile was dwindling, the pantry bare save for some dried beans and a bit of cornmeal. We'd lost the last cow to wolves last month, and the nearest town, Silver Creek, was a 2-day ride in good weather. Impossible now. I thought of William then, as I always did in the quiet moments. His strong hands building this cabin, his steady laugh that could cut through any darkness. Fever had stolen him 2 years back, quick and merciless, leaving me to bury him under the aspen tree out back. I'd told the children he was just sleeping, but the truth was, I'd been sleepwalking through life ever since, one foot in front of the other, holding on for them. That's when it happened, a thunderous crack that shook the whole cabin like the hand of God himself. I bolted upright, heart slamming in my chest as dust sifted from the rafters. "What in heaven's name—" I started, but Sam was already at the door, peering out into the swirling white. "Mama! The drift by the woodpile, it's collapsed," he shouted, his voice high with fear. I grabbed my shawl and yanked the door open, the wind slamming into me like a fist. Snow whipped my face, stinging like needles, and I squinted through the blizzard. There, half buried in the fresh mound by the splintered logs, was a shadowy figure, a man sprawled unnaturally, his form barely visible under the drifts. My blood ran cold, colder than the air biting at my skin. Who could be out in this? Trappers didn't venture this high in winter, and outlaws. Well, they didn't knock politely, but there he was, not moving, ice crusting his coat like armor. "Sam, stay inside with Grace," I ordered, my voice sharp over the howl. But the boy was already bursting through the door after me, cheeks flushed red, eyes wide with a mix of terror and awe that only a child could muster. "Mama, there's a man in the snow! He's hurt bad!" Grace poked her head out, her small hands gripping the doorframe, her doll dangling forgotten. "We can't leave him, Mama. He'll freeze like the baby birds last spring." I hesitated, the wind slicing deeper, whispering doubts in my ear. What if he was trouble? A thief or worse? But looking into Grace's pleading eyes, so much like William's, I couldn't turn away. Not when I'd lost so much already. "Help me drag him in," I said, my decision made in that heartbeat. We fought the storm together, my children and I, hauling him one boot at a time across the threshold. He was heavy, solid under the layers, clad in fine leather boots polished to a shine that spoke of city money, and a wool coat with brass buttons that gleamed even under the ice. Blood streaked his temple, a deep gash weeping red into the snow, and his side was dark with more of it. A stab wound, jagged and ugly. His breath came shallow, fogging faintly like he was clinging to life by a thread. He looked like he'd tumbled from another world altogether, one of wealth and warmth, into this harsh wilderness that chewed men up and spat them out. He groaned once as we laid him on my bed, a deep scrape from somewhere inside, and I set to work with trembling hands. I tore strips from an old dress, William's favorite, the blue one I'd worn on our wedding day, and bound the wounds as best I could, boiled water from the kettle, mixed with willow bark from my dwindling stores, and pressed a damp cloth to his forehead. He flinched but didn't wake. Sam stoked the fire higher, his small face pale, while Grace hovered nearby, whispering to her doll as if it could hear her prayers. That night, I sat vigil by the fire, the loaded rifle across my knees, watching his chest rise and fall unevenly. My gut twisted with warnings. This Stormbringer carried more trouble than the weather. I could feel it in my bones. Who was he? Why here now? The wind rattled the shutters like laughter, mocking my fears. I thought of the stories from town, of men on the run from the law, hiding in the hills. But there was something in his face, even in sleep, strong jaw, dark hair matted with blood, that stirred a forgotten ache in me. Not fear exactly, but a pull like the first green shoot after a long winter. By morning, the fever had set in fierce. His skin burned hot as coals, sweat beating despite the chill in the air. I applied more compresses, murmuring encouragements like I had for William in his final days. "Just keep breathing," I whispered, my voice cracking. "That's all you gotta do." Grace brought him water in a tin cup, her small hands steady while Sam paced, arms crossed, muttering about strangers bringing bad luck. Mid-morning, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open, a piercing green, sharp as pine needles, unfocused with pain. He whispered for water, his voice raspy like gravel under boots. I held the cup to his lips and he drank slow, wary, like he didn't trust it to stay down. "What's your name?" I asked, studying him close. He blinked, those green eyes meeting mine for the first time, holding a world of secrets. "Ethan," he rasped, then shrugged weakly with a ghost of a smile, as if to say it didn't matter if I believed him. Grace watched from the corner, clutching her doll tight, her eyes wide with curiosity. Sam, though, crossed his arms tighter, suspicion etched on his young face like it had been carved there. "We don't need no intruders," he said under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear. Over the next days, Ethan's fever raged and broke in waves. He shared fragments of talk when he could, bits about riding hard from the south, evading shadows he wouldn't name. I sensed he was running from something dark, a haunted past that clung to him like smoke. In his delirium, he mumbled names. Harlan, Eliza, his voice cracking with grief that twisted my heart. Lost love? Betrayal? It hinted at a story in the southern range, where men fought over land and honor with guns and grit. I caught myself watching him more than I should, noting the way his hands clenched the blanket, strong and callous despite the fine clothes. There was a ruggedness to him, a quiet strength that reminded me of William, but different, edgier, like a blade honed by loss. My heart, long frozen, stirred with questions I didn't dare ask. What if he stayed? What if he brought the warmth I'd forgotten? On the fourth day, he stood shakily, wrapped in a blanket, insisting on helping despite my protests. "You've done enough," he said, his voice steadier now. He mended a broken fence rail in the pale sun, his movements careful, pained. Sam confronted him out there, arms crossed like a little sheriff. "I don't trust you," the boy declared. Ethan nodded, those green eyes approving. "That's wise in these wild lands, son. Trust's earned, not given." It softened something in me, seeing him treat Sam like that. He chopped kindling next, careful not to reopen his wounds, and taught the boy to set snares. They caught a rabbit by sundown, our first meet in weeks. Grace chattered to Ethan about birds and songs, claiming her doll could outlast any blizzard better than a cowboy. He smiled then, just with his eyes, a softening that made my pulse quicken unexpectedly. But danger lurked, as it always did in these parts. One afternoon, a sudden whiteout blizzard ambushed Ethan while he was fetching wood from the pile. The wind whipped up, fierce, blinding snow swallowing everything in white. I paced inside, heart in my throat, imagining him lost out there, frozen like so many before. Hours stretched like taffy, the children huddled close, Grace whispering prayers. When he finally stumbled back, frostbitten and exhausted, collapsing at the door with snow caking his lashes, I rushed to him, pulling him in. "You fool," I scolded, but my hands were gentle as I warmed his fingers by the fire. "You could have died." He looked up at me, green eyes steady. But I didn't. Thanks to thoughts of getting back here. That evening by the fire, with the storm still raging outside, I shared about William. How he'd built this cabin with his brother Jed, who'd left for the gold fields years back and never returned. Fever took William Swift, leaving me to bury him under the aspen, telling the kids he was sleeping. Life's felt like sleepwalking since, I admitted, staring into the flames. My voice barely above a whisper. Ethan listened, quiet, then said, "He was a lucky man to have you, Emily. Strong as the mountains, with a heart big enough to pull a stranger from the snow." His words hung in the air, forging a silent bond in the room's warm hush. I felt it then, a spark fragile as new ice but real. Subtle changes crept in. Ethan repaired the chicken coop without asking, sharpened Sam's knife till it gleamed. He became part of our rhythm, not imposing but fitting like a missing piece. I found him one day on the roof, fixing a loose shingle, pressing his side in pain. "You should rest," I called up, but hid a faint smile at his stubbornness. Inside, the house felt alive again, with spring hints melting the edges of winter. Grace braiding rope for her doll's new sash, Sam carving letters in soft wood by the window. Then came the sharp knock that shattered the fragile peace. I opened the door to Harlan Brooks, the banker from Silver Creek, dressed in city wool and boots too clean for honest work. His eyes swept the cabin like he owned it already, landing on Ethan with a suspicious glint. "Mrs. Harper," he said with a smug grin, tipping his hat. "Heard you've taken in a stray. But that's not why I'm here. Your payments are overdue, again." My stomach nodded. The loan William had taken to buy seed and tools. The one I'd been scraping by on since his death. "I have till spring," I protested, but Brooks shook his head. "Spring came early this year, or so the bank says. You've got 30 days, or we seize everything." His eyes lingered on Ethan, narrowing. "And who might you be, mister? Look like trouble to me." Ethan stepped forward from the shadows, arms crossed, his presence filling the doorway like a wall. But he said nothing, just stared Brooks down with those piercing green eyes. The banker shifted uncomfortably, handed me the folded notice, and mounted his horse, his parting words hanging like a noose. 30 days. Emily, don't make me send the sheriff." As his horse faded into the drifts, I turned to Ethan, the paper crumpling in my fist. The cabin, our home, the only thing left of William's dream, was slipping away. And in that moment, with the wind whispering threats, I wondered if this stranger I'd saved would be our salvation, or our undoing. The days blurred after that, the foreclosure notice burning a hole in my pocket like a brand. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if we lost the cabin? Where would we go? Silver Creek was full of judgmental eyes. Widows like me were pitied at best, prey at worst. Old Mrs. Callahan down in town had lost her place last year, ended up begging on the streets till consumption took her. I wouldn't let that happen to my children. Ethan noticed, of course. He was observant like that, reading the lines on my face like a trail map. "We'll figure it," he said one evening as we sat by the fire. Grace was asleep on her cot, Sam whittling a stick into a whistle. "I've got ways." "What ways?" I pressed, my voice sharper than intended. Trust was building, but slow, like thawing ice. He glanced away into the flames, ones that might bring more trouble first. "But I owe you my life, Emily. Ain't leaving you to face this alone." His words stirred that spark again, warmer now, spreading through me like whiskey on a cold night. I caught myself imagining his arms around me, strong and sure, chasing away the loneliness that had become my constant companion. But I pushed it down. Foolish thoughts for a widow with responsibilities. To distract myself, I threw into chores, but the land fought back. One morning, as I milked the goat we'd traded for last fall, skinny thing named Bess, I heard voices drifting from the barn, Sam and Ethan talking low. I paused, eavesdropping like a schoolgirl. "And Pa used to say, 'Trust your gut in these hills,'" Sam was saying. "Strangers bring snakes," Ethan chuckled soft. "Your Pa sounds wise, but sometimes snakes are already here, hiding in the grass." "Takes a stranger to spot 'em," Sam grunted, but I heard the thaw in his voice. Later, Grace tugged at Ethan's sleeve, begging for a story. He obliged, spinning a tale of riding the open range, chasing mustangs under endless skies. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, painting pictures that made her eyes sparkle. And the lead stallion, he was wild as the wind, but even he knew when to find shelter. Was he talking about himself? I wondered, watching from the kitchen. That night, as I tucked Grace in, she whispered, "Mama, Ethan's like the hero in Pa's old books. Think he'll stay?" "Hush now," I said, but my heart echoed the question. The blizzard ambush came without warning, a whiteout swallowing the world in fury. Ethan had gone out for more wood, the pile running low again. Minutes turned to hours, the wind shrieking like banshees. I paced the floorboards, wringing my hands, visions of him lost forever flashing in my mind. "He'll come back," Sam said, trying to sound brave, but his voice trembled. When the door finally burst open, Ethan stumbled in, snow-crusted and blue-lipped, collapsing to his knees. Frostbite nipped at his fingers, exhaustion etching deep lines on his face. I rushed to him, stripping off his frozen coat, rubbing life back into his limbs by the fire.